So we talked about getting into games and kind of the building the portfolios. That was mentioned kind of a lot in terms of getting that experience at home, whether it's outside of university or while you're at school. Are there any kind of tools or tips you'd sort of think of suggesting in those areas, sort of things you could download or YouTube channels that you could watch or those kind of things? So who's going to jump in first?
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, okay. So, like, from a design standpoint, from, I'd say, like, top-level brainstorming, or mind mapping, sorry. I believe that's the correct term. Xmind is a great tool.
Yeah.
It's like, I use that, like, whenever I do game jam, I'll put the theme in the middle and come up with whatever random things I can come up with that other people won't be doing. So that's good for, like, high level. Of course, any standard Microsoft Office kind of subset is great, like Excel, Word. OneNote's really good for sharing stuff together with other people if you're working with groups as well. But from a engine standpoint, Unreal is free. You can use Unreal, download it. It's a big download, but once you've got it, you can have a play around with it. Same with Unity, GameMaker as well. I use GameMaker for my game jams, although I might be upgrading soon to Unreal. I've been using like GameMaker for years. There's tons of other free tools out there. So for like younger kids, there's Scratch. I'm trying to think of what the other one is called that is similar to Scratch.
The Microsoft one, was it?
No, there's... I'm trying to think of like BAFTA, YGD, and the games that are usually submitted. And there's Scratch and there's another one. And I'm trying to think if Scratch is the online one or not. But also, like, in terms of creating 3D stuff, so I like the thing I always suffer on when I do game jams is art, because I'm not an artist. I can get by, but I'm no amazing artist like you two. And... you're amazing, you guys.
Please do go on.
But so I usually go to 2Ds, and I've always stayed away from 3D. Firstly, because there's the cost of entry for creating 3D models. But hey, Microsoft Paint on like Windows 10 has 3D now, and I made a cat with a rubber donut around it, and then shoved it in Unreal and made that my character, like, as a test. Because you can create FBX files in Microsoft Paint now. So like. It's crazy, and it's like free. It just comes with Windows, so...
Programmers will take over the artists with
yeah,
programmer
yeah.
artwork.
Programmer art everywhere. Like crappy-looking cats and whatnot. But, yeah, like, and of course, I'm sure you've got some good examples for things, but I thought I'd just mention that for Paint, because it's crazy that it has 3D options now, so, yeah.
And so would you recommend, on the art side, things like SketchUp or...
Can I just say SketchUp as well? It's actually good for level design.
I think of, is it Blender? Is Blender a viable option in terms of sort of an alternative to ZBrush and things like that?
Well, for an alternative is for Max and Maya, it certainly is. So I've actually taught myself how to use Blender past 6 months, and I'm now just happily using it. So it's free.
Yeah, Blender's free, so it's a good entry point if you don't have Maya.
Yeah. As far as the sculpting kind of software, ZBrush have just released ZBrush Core, which is a cut-down version. There's a lot cheaper. I don't know the figures off the top of my head. I know there are some free alternatives out there as well, where you can play around with the sculpting side, like I showed you with the ZBrush in the video.
Cool.
Yeah, the great thing about UI is that it's all 2D stuff. So if you have Photoshop, that's it. All you need is Photoshop or Illustrator. There's free alternatives like GIMP or even...
Paint.net?
Yeah.
I use Paint.net.
Yeah, or even Paint, like if you're, that amazing. So it just came to my mind and just left me. Oh dear. Okay, but anyway, it's 2D stuff. You can just use anything you want. In fact, we just use pen and paper. Mm-hmm. Like 50% of UX design is on pen and paper because it's so iterative, and you need to like quick iteration out, and you can't be spending like 20 minutes on a tiny little box, So. Yeah, just do whatever.
Post-it notes, that's one of your main tools, wasn't it?
Yeah, Post-it notes. Oh, God, yeah. And a notebook and, even a wall, anything. Don't write on your parents' wall. That's not good.
Anyway,
so in terms of programming, I use Visual Studio. If you want to learn how to write C++ or C#, then Visual Studio, there's free versions that you can download. I think it's called Visual Studio Community now. Yes, you can download that version, and if you just Google C++ or C# tutorial, then you'll find more than you could probably watch in your lifetime. And also with Unity and Unreal as well. If you've got any kind of issue that you're not quite sure what the solution is, then if you just Google that exact error message that you're having, or you know, like programming is basically 50% the art of using Google. You'll find that there's already like 100 people that have had that issue and come up with like a variety of potential solutions to it already that you can try out. So yeah, I use like Notepad++ a lot, like slightly better than the built-in Notepad.
I use Notepad. I'm old school.
And Beyond Compare as well.
Yeah,
I use that quite a lot to compare files and directories to see what's different. When something's gone wrong, you can compare things. Source control as well. Even if you're working on your own, it's not just a collaborative thing. But if you use Bitbucket, then there's unlimited private repos. And put all of your stuff in there.
Just in case nobody knows, what is source control?
Yeah.
So basically you can put all of your files in, and it will track every single change that you've made. So one of the things that can often happen to me is I do something and it works, and I go, oh, that's cool, but I can make it better. So I rewrite it, and then it doesn't work. And you're like, well, now I want to go back to that version that worked. And that's what source control allows you to do. You can go back and see the individual line-by-line changes that you've made. That allow you to see not only what you changed, but also the comment that you put next to it when you checked it in as well.
A TARDIS. Time machine, right?
That's what.
It's also a good backup if you lose a bunch of files in your computer. At least you've got it in the cloud or wherever your thing is. Yeah. So it's always backup your stuff. Always.
You never know when
always
you're going to lose
safe.
a hard drive.
Yeah.
I was just going to add as well, like on programming, because like I don't program, but like when I use GameMaker, I haven't used the drag and drop scripting that they use for years, but they do have their own language, which is GML, which is like basic variable kind of language, and like that's a good starting point as well for programming. If you start with some of the more simpler languages before you then move up to C. But
Yeah, Blueprint's in Unreal as well as got a visual scripting language in it, which is
yeah, you just have to know what they're called. Which is like I'll be like, oh, what's the name of that thing? Type this in. No, that's not it.
Yeah.
Start looking through and like undoing the arrows so I can see.
Cool. Do you have any questions from the audience at this point? Yeah.
Sorry, can I just probably just jump in? Yeah, because obviously we do different things.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to get into social and community, really think about growing your own community as a test. It shows incredible skill. Learn how to make a Facebook group for something that you're passionate about. See if you can build it. You'll start to understand the idea of creating assets, having basic Photoshop skill, self-taught Photoshop skills. If you can actually use it, put it on your CV. Even if it's self-taught, you don't need a qualification. The same for video editing. Some of the greatest people I work with are self-taught, but it's a skill you need to have. With a really talented guy, he started a fan group for Final Fantasy fans on Facebook called Final Fantasy UK Fans. 3 months ago, he applied for a job at Square Enix, and he's now European Community Manager for Square Enix Japan. All because of a Facebook group. Getting a Twitter account, maybe just start a Twitter account for something you're passionate about and run it. Run it as if you were going to run a professional account. So when you're coming to us, you understand the idea of the different assets you can use, what looks good, what doesn't. You can show us that you can book things in and actually run an interaction. These are really important. For us, in my side, it's way more practical with what you can do publicly. But actually starting to grow communities, if you want to come into social media and community, is not easy. And not everyone, not every community you start is going to flourish and have hundreds of thousands of people and be super popular. But it shows that you can do it. And that's really the step. Because especially for community, passion is number one. You can teach someone how to run a social account, but you can't teach passion. And that really comes across in what you do, especially when you're public facing. So, really have a think about getting started.
Cool. So the question in the middle?
I come from a coding background, and I was just wondering, I've never played around with visual scripting. Are they like interchangeable, or are they linked in some way? Behind those nodes, is there code you write?
Yeah, what?
Just want to repeat the question. So the question is regarding visual programming languages, is there actual code behind them? How does that interplay with scripted code, typed code? Yeah.
I'm sure Liz, you'll be able to fill in more. I maybe you're smiling, but like from my experience, like because the reason why I haven't moved over to Unreal for game jams is at the moment I'm working with I'm two amazing programmers at the Chinese Room, and they've been creating like actions and events for us within Unreal. So they use the source code and then add bits to it that then I can use. So there's of course the source of the engine, which contains all that information, and then you can modify it to work that way. And so like I rely on programmers creating me extra things that Unreal potentially doesn't have that I can use.
Yeah, so the blueprints is all sitting on top of C++. It's all written in C++ under the hood, and you can see what those nodes are doing as well when you go and have a look at when you open it up in Visual Studio and have a look at the source code. And then, you can extend the visual language and write your own nodes to do custom actions for your project.
Quick follow-up question, sorry. So is, for example, one of the default nodes could be something like play MP3, and all the code behind that is written for you. You just drag that because you want a sound to be played at that specific moment.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's about using ready things rather than writing them from scratch.
Yeah, it's like having, all your actions that you could ever want to create in a game, like laid out for you across tons and tons and tons. There's like loads of them there, and you just pick and place things when you want them, when you want to trigger them off in the game using trigger boxes or using delays and times or other actions taking place. Like there's a lot to it, but
well, I mean, obviously, if you've come from a coding background, you will have heard the phrase "don't reinvent the wheel" a few times. So that's exactly it. If someone's already written a node that does that thing you need to do, then maybe just use that node.
So we use Unreal Engine on Raiders, and we tend to implement things in Blueprint first of all, just to see how they work, and then we'll take the slower parts of that, which we could do better in C++ more optimally, and then move those across, and a lot of the kind of the spaghetti blueprint at times becomes then a nice little box which you just call, and that does all the magic stuff inside
the blueprint can get really overcomplicated, and it makes it more difficult to read as well. Something like swapping two elements around in an array is really complicated in a blueprint, but like 4 lines of code in C++. So
I second on what Simon just said as well, because like as a designer in at least at CA and at Chinese Room, like we prototype things within blueprints, and then it might be a case that you can then optimize it a lot better if you then take the blueprint, see what it does, and then take it over into code. And it's just super quick for prototyping as well, so that's what's good about it.
Yeah, the overall net benefit is positive, but there's some pain when you first get into it, having come from a background where everything we wrote was always in C++. We switched to Unreal last year, and we're sort of just now getting the benefits of that transition to a mix of the two kind of thing, so it's good. Any other questions from the audience? Yep.
I don't know how much of a sense you guys have for this, but how is the state of the British games industry? Does the future look particularly bright? I know a lot of people move from Britain abroad to work, and just from you guys working in Britain games, how is it?
So the question is the state of the British games industry. How is it? Is it going well? I can certainly do some bits on this as well. So you guys want to go for it?
Very much. I don't know if you ever heard of a company called Yuki. So Yuki are the governing body for games here in the UK. So for things like tax breaks, which obviously are hugely important, they really are the ones that go to the government. They're really the ones that do the petitioning. They've been doing a lot of work to not just help the larger companies, but really help the independent teams get off the ground and get stabilized as well. I know Simon does a lot of work with Yuki, and Simon does an incredible amount of work actually with young people and education and spreading the news of what we're doing. So if you already know Yuki. So if you can, anything they're doing, get involved, because they're really they're the touch point for us, all of us, regardless of your company size. They're the ones championing British gaming, especially at a government level, which is really where changes can happen.
Yeah, and I think recently, in the last few years, a few people went to Canada to work and that kind of thing, and that was all to do with tax breaks. Like those companies had all popped up because their government had given them some really good tax breaks, and we've now got that here in the UK as well. So we should start to see the benefits of that.
As a outsider, as a foreigner. The UK games industry is actually very inviting. Like, especially I'm from Southeast Asia, and from our point of view, it's either the West or the East, which is Japan or America. But I ended up in the UK, and I have been trying so hard for the last 8 years to stay in this country, to continue working here, and it's very difficult when you get certain people tell me that, oh, you're taking jobs from other people. I'm just like, well, I work hard for this, because I see the UK games community. Look at these people; they're gorgeous. Like, who wouldn't want to work with them?
Simon says thank you.
I know it's about me.
And I spent my entire adult working life has been in the UK, and I want to continue that as long as I physically can. A lot of our EU friends are trying to work really hard in this country, even though their countries have video games as well. But there's something about the UK games industry, the community of people here. Everybody knows each other, and everyone is so supportive. We're just like, if I have a problem, I'm just like, I have a problem. And people are like, hey, you need help? Just DM me, or like email me. I still get emails and stuff from my fellow peers of how to overcome both technical problems of how to deal with like your game development, and also on a personal level of how I deal with imposter syndrome, or how I feel about being a woman, or how I feel about being in UI and not a lot of people take us seriously, or things like that. So I think there is a bright future. The talent is here, the support is here. You just on the risk of being mushy, you kind of have to believe in it, And of course, people like Yuki are doing stuff like in the government level, so that people like us can continue doing what we love in the country that we want to do it in. Like if we do leave, it's with a very heavy heart, and it's not because we want to.
Yeah, I'm not going to speak with the Yuki hat on directly today, but as we've said, we've done a lot of work in terms of pushing government for things like tax credits. We've got things like SEIS, which is the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, so that helps fund companies doing initial kind of prototyping and building companies. You've got UK Games Fund, which funds up to £35,000 prototypes for games. It used to be called the Abate Prototype Fund. There's things like Games Lab, which is run by Creative England, so that runs out of this hub here, so it funds Leeds City Region companies producing prototypes and getting their game to the next stage to take them to full development. So we've got a huge amount of different good things going on. Obviously there's a B word, which is kind of potentially damaging our hiring from Europe right now, and we're sort of handling how we'll address that in terms of visas and other things that are going to be changing. But no, I think overall it's growing massively. We're one of the biggest industries in the UK in terms of gross value added and all the things that matter to government. We're employing over 24,000 people in the industry and development sort of side of things, so it's huge and it's getting bigger and better. Any other questions? Yep.
What general advice can you give to someone who's recently graduated into the animation?
Cool. So the question is, what advice can be given to someone who's recently graduated in 2D animation?
Do you have a show reel?
Yes, I've got a show reel on the website.
There you go. You're already on the right track. Okay. A show reel might not be enough. Sometimes you gotta show passion for it. Like if you have a pet project or a collaboration, or even like a community thing where you have like a little, I made this group for my fellow students and we share resources or whatever. We love that. The more outside of your uni work that you do, the more we want you, because it shows initiative. It shows that we can just drop you into a pipeline. You can start running. Yeah, so like, if you have a show and you feel like it's not great, just keep working at it. We love to see your processes. If you have a blog of how you learn things, or if you note down things, we like that. Just social media presence is helpful in a sense that we always Google people who apply to us. Yes, I'm easily Googleable. That sounds weird, but it works to my advantage. So if we find like an Instagram where you show all like GIFs or whatever, or a Twitter full of like, hey, I love animation, I did this, I did that, and we're like, oh, this guy's cool, like just whatever it is, show passion and always share, no matter how awful you think your work is, because this is the thing about artists. You're always beating yourself up about like, oh, my friend is better than me, or this person in Riot, of course they're better than you. They've been in the industry for like 20 years. But you know what? You do you. You know, you show your stuff, no matter how awful. You look back at it when you're like a senior animator, it's like, oh, I remember that time when I felt really bad about myself. I'm cool now. You know? So yeah, just share everything and don't be afraid to ask for help as well. You know, just a community of people.
And yeah, send it out to loads of companies. You just got to sort of carpet bomb it, because until you get in there somewhere, I applied to many companies for my first job and only got the one interview. And as I said, I feel so lucky that Rebellion saw that little spark of promise in me and took me on.
Yeah, I applied to like a billion, million, gazillion companies, and I only got one interview, and then I got that job. And then I had to find another job, and then I again applied a billion times and only got the one interview. So yeah, rejection is so normal. Like you want to talk about rejection, talk to actors, talk to voice actors. They get rejected 3 times a day. They're like, another one, lol. You know? So like, don't get dejected, as in just keep on going. Like the worst thing they can do is not reply. That's nothing, you know? Or even if it's a speculative application, just send it over. Again, what's the worst? They're not going to reply to you and say, oh, "What the hell are you doing?" No, they're not going to laugh at you. You know, they'll probably be too busy to respond. But at least you tried. And you know what? Don't worry about applying more than once, because once we have you in, we'll probably remember you from like, hey, he applied like last year, and then he applied again this year. Oh, he's improved. Wow. Okay, so we'll look at you again. So, you know, it's all about growing that thick skin and trying not to fall into the trap of thinking like, oh, God, no one's replied. Oh, God, no one's offering me anything. I have no interview, so therefore I'm really bad at what I do. No. Shh. Yeah, push that back and just keep on going. Somebody will notice you because, you know what? You're passionate, you know? That's why you're here today. You're looking for ways into the industry.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's looking at a lot of CVs right now and, you know, recruiting a lot of people for Ford or Lemon before, like over 50 staff probably over the 10 years we hired, out of 5 times that probably applying, to be honest. One thing not to do is send a BCC email or CC'd email to every other company in the UK. That's really bad. Doesn't feel like you've been sort of targeted as a company. So make sure that you customize your email and what you're pitching to that company. Research the games they make. Research the people who are there. Suck up to them a bit in terms of, you know, I really like this game you did, or I feel like it adds something to that series that you work on, or whatever it happens to be. And just be aware of what they're doing, whether it's through their social media. It's a lot easier to do nowadays than it used to be. It was pretty much used to be just a post box and a game every year that you'd see them come out with, whereas now it's much more, you can have more engagement with the companies before you apply to them as well. So stalk the people on LinkedIn or whatever it happens to be to understand who the art director is, or who the 2D artists are, how many artists do they employ right now, all that kind of sort of research that can help back up your application, I guess.
Like, I was just going to add, I mean, I know from a design standpoint, but like the advice I always give people, unless I'm going to be told I'm wrong, although I don't think I will. Not that I'm like bigging myself up, but I always say to people, like, look online to see if there's any games out there that are being made by people where they need a 2D animator, because there's tons of them out there. You've just got to find them. You can find them on Twitter. You can probably find them. Can you find people on ArtStation that way? Or is it, I didn't know if it was just portfolios. Or, like, as I mentioned in my talk earlier, like, game jams are a great thing, especially the ones where they're more collaborative and you go to a space to meet with other people, because there's always going to be people that need 2D animation, like, massively, because when you're someone like me and you try and animate 2D, it looks... I mean, I did a bee for the game jam I did last weekend, so that was fine. Its wings just needed a flap. I could animate that. But like, if I ever want to do anything else, it doesn't look as good. And then it just means that the final result of the game jam game you create doesn't look as polished. Yet then when you look at one that's been made with a team of people and they've had an animator, it's just like, how did these people make this game in 2 days? And it's just because they had those different disciplines and skill sets to create those games. So like, you know, I'd say people modding stuff, but then that's usually more 3D. But like, there's just forums everywhere, right? Yeah, where people are needing people to help out. Sure, you might not get paid. Sometimes it's volunteer work. Sometimes they might be able to pay you something at the end of it when they've like finished it. And especially with how many mobile developers there are as well, because you know 2D is a massive requirement in terms of mobile. So
mobile is mostly 2D anyway. And like remember my programmer friend? I made his art, and he's like, yeah, I'm the coolest programmer ever. Everyone was jealous of him. I was like, yeah, that's me. And then you could be that person for another game jam. Game jams are great because you know what? That accumulates to experience. The whole like, I need 1 to 3 years experience. Well, that's just that's for people who self-opt out of these things where they're like, oh, I don't have enough experience, so I'm not even going to apply. So like, don't be one of those people. Like, if you have game jams, that is your experience because you have knowledge, and then you've created something, and you've applied it to something that exists, and not just
under pressure.
Exactly. In like 2 days? Oh my gosh. Yeah, and even the whole under pressure thing is applicable in games because we're always under pressure-ish. So yeah, just don't stop creating stuff. Collaboration. I mean, game development is never a one-man team. Like, sure, there's the indie people who is the one guy, but then he's got like maybe 5 freelancers who help out here and there. So like, just meet people. Someone will find you useful, and you'll feel great about yourself.
Cool. Awesome. Any other questions? Yeah.
I feel like I just sat down from really short. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in like the more narrative side of games and like writing for games maybe. I just wonder how that works with what you guys do, and kind of like if you just have any advice for getting into that.
So the question is around any advice regarding narrative and I guess writing in games.
Yeah.
So there is a specific subset of like design, which is narrative designers. It does depend on the company, though, if they're big enough to have someone as a narrative designer. So, for example, at the Chinese Room, Dan, our creative director, does all our writing. He's an amazing writer, and it's just crazy the amount of stuff he can come up with just like on the fly. But like previously at Creative Assembly, we had a narrative designer. I'm trying to think of what his official job role was at the time, but we only had one. And then people would always ask me like, oh, have you got any jobs going for it? So it's like, it is a fairly niche role, but they do exist. And like, we took people on as well as like contractors, like doing it like for like a set amount of time. It's definitely something you can do. I think I would say once again, like, help out on smaller games as well, because that's a good way to get your foot in, because the trouble always for like, at least thinking about being a writer is like, it's quite a high level role usually that people put trust in you to create a story for a game, because generally that's what the game will revolve around, and it will be a key component of it. And so you just have to have people believing in your stories, and either like the characters that you want to write, or the dialogue you want to write, or it might even be like environmental storytelling you want to do as well, because there's like multiple different aspects to it. But like, that's a little bit of advice.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great writers to follow. Rhianna Pratchett, Tail Spinners, huge number of different people. I was at a talk last week in Reboot, and the sort of world building side of things is huge as well, in terms of how everything in the game tends to fall from that. The good games, anyway, have always been thought about in terms of world building and the structure behind them, which is what guys like Chinese Room are awesome at. Does anyone else want to add things on narrative?
So currently I work in a mobile games company, and you'd think there's not much of a story in mobile games. You'll be wrong. So one of my tasks is to add bosses in each, like, we've got a bunch of levels, and towards the end you're supposed to beat a boss. And then in this boss UI, we have like a tiny little dialogue where the boss says like a piece of thing where, it's like, oh, if you don't have Ferrari, don't even talk to me, I'm not going to race you. Something like that. And you know what? We have to make that stuff up ourselves, and it's really bad. Like, I cringe every time I see one of those, like, self-written stuff. So you think narrative is about, like, big fantasy world and, huge lines. But sometimes even, like, tiny dialogues help, I remember one of my friends, the guys who made Overcooked, is about the collaborative Overcooked game. Yeah, they had to make their own dialogues, and even they were like, oh god, I had to do this really quickly. Ugh. And you know what? They could have helped. They could have needed a narrative person just to give that extra like believability and kind of like likability of the characters. It's based off what they say. Like, yes, some people kind of just skip through the content, but most people do read it. So like, you gotta think about like the small dialogues and also the big story arcs, lore stuff as well, because you cover all those things. Like, just, again, make friends, see who needs you.
Yeah, like, I think also just to add on that, because you kind of reminded me about what you said earlier about, in your talk, how people generally just pick up UI and have to do it, because like sometimes it would fall on a designer or programmers as well before like UI artists and designers. But it's kind of the same with narrative as well, because in some companies they won't have someone specifically for that, so they end up just being like, oh, I'll put this in and hopefully this will be fine, and someone will change it, and then sometimes it doesn't get changed, and that ends up being what happens in there. And that's why like we need people to like kind of make themselves known to be narrative designers, because it is like something that people don't like name themselves as. So it's something that companies potentially need, but they don't maybe always realize they need it as well. So it's always worth like putting feelers out there and making yourself known, because there's quite a few like writers which are like getting more known. It's just that they have to like try and get there in the first place, which of course is the slight challenge. But
Catch-22. One other thing might be GDC Vault has a lot of free YouTube videos from previous game developer conferences, and there's quite a few writing talks on there, and I certainly watch a lot of those because, again, learning all the time, it's kind of interesting to look at other disciplines that you are nowhere near, which is writing for me, and we've been hiring writers recently for our project, so it's a very interesting area. Any other questions from the audience? Yep.
Yeah, so from a coding perspective, what are some of the best things I can have on my CV that actually set me apart from other people? So it seems like everyone's got a computer science degree nowadays. So like, what can I say that?
So the question is how to set yourself apart, specifically in programming when it comes to your CV or portfolio, which I'd say is probably more relevant.
Extracurricular activities. The problem with if you do a degree and you don't do anything else on top of that, then your CV is just going to look exactly the same, like you've already realised. It looks exactly the same as everyone that's done the same degree as you. Your portfolio will look exactly the same as well. So, like a lot of people have been suggesting game jams. That's a really good thing to get involved in, to get a few extra things. Also, just because you've handed a piece of work in and it's met all of the criteria for your course, it doesn't mean that you need to stop working on it. You could take it a little bit further and see what else you can do to it, and just have a portfolio of work that isn't just work that you've done for your degree, because then they could all just end up looking like tech demos. And it kind of depends on what you want to get into, but especially for gameplay, I think I'd look for demos that were complete games that have like a whole cycle of you begin the game, you play the game, you get a leaderboard at the end or something like that. Maybe some options, so just to get the idea that you can you could fit into all of those. You understand what goes into making a game, and some music, some networking. All of the little bits that you could put into it. So, I would suggest doing game jams are good for getting quantity, but not necessarily quality. And just because you've done something doesn't mean it has to go in your portfolio. You should just put your best work in your portfolio. It doesn't have to have everything in it. And then as soon as something good comes along that you've done that's better than something else, you can take that old stuff out.
My biggest bugbear with art portfolios is people leave everything in there, or even the original bad stuff when they were still learning.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, like in terms of programming, I think as well, you have to be careful, of course, on your CV when listing like languages because of course you need to know a fair amount in them, right, before you put it on your CV. But then also it's the fact that you can put ones in, like, I know, like from seeing a lot of CVs, that sometimes people will put how advanced they feel they are in the programming languages, because you can always learn. Because that's the thing, like we're like Lizzie was saying earlier, it's all about learning, and we're always trying to fill our heads with more stuff. And programmers are exactly the same; they're always constantly learning, no matter what what language they work in. But as well as that, like if you then go for an interview, generally you'll get a programming test. At least everywhere I've worked.
Everywhere I've ever worked, I've been given a programming test. Even after 10 years of working in the industry, they've always given me a test.
So, like generally, because it's hard, of course, to set a programming CV aside from like other ones. Other than like the thing is always like make your CV really readable and clear, and maybe have a splash of something on it that can draw people's attention to it. That's what I've always done as a designer. But and then if you've got the skills that they require, then they'll find out if you're where you need to be in like your knowledge of everything. So
yeah, but also I'd be really frightened of a graduate programmer that came in for an interview and marked themselves like 9 out of 10 for C++ knowledge.
I think there's 5 programmers in the world who know C++ fully, right? Because there's so many new extensions every year that I don't even keep up because it normally doesn't
being
work.
a little bit humble is always a good thing as well. Because one of the really big problems, I think, when you graduate as well, and I think you touched on this earlier, is you go from being at university being probably one of the best programmers at the university, and when you go into a games company, you're going to be one of the worst programmers in the building, and that's a real kick in the teeth, and it's a little bit, for your ego to get over there. But everyone's got to go through it, and it's good to be a little bit humble, I think.
Yeah, I think no matter what you do in this industry, many of us are in the games industry because we're incredibly passionate about video games. That's really why so many of us are here. If you're not going to put the extra work in, there is somebody else behind you who will. And I really do mean that. There is always somebody else who is willing to go the extra mile, who is willing to do the extra curricular activity, who is willing to go the distance on their coursework that they submit for their course. If you're not willing to really give it your all, don't be shocked when the person who did gets the job over you. And I can't push that enough. We're all here because we're passionate, so go in head first. Do it all.
When I was at uni, the lecturer got one of the other programmers to come over and talk to me because they said, well, she's getting better marks than you, so why don't you go and ask what she's doing? And this person said, so how many hours are you putting in outside? And I think I probably lied and said I was doing about 10 hours a week outside of uni, and that person was completely shocked. Like, how do you find time to put 10 hours in? The full-time job is going to be a minimum 40 hours a week. Yeah. So, the real truth of the matter was that every single waking hour I was at my PC doing work. So that's the kind of, or in my world, that's the kind of dedication that I'm looking for from other people.
So time-wise, we're a bit close to the end now, so all the panellists will be here for a little bit longer to be able to chat to you afterwards. But we'll just do a quick round-up question. So one final tip, if you have one, in terms of getting into, how would you steal your job? What would the tip be to steal your job in the industry to get where you are, basically? Or maybe other than killing you all and taking your job.
I don't know about stealing my job because I run my own company. There's only 2 people that work there. But a general tip for not just game programming, but for life, I always like to give people is that whenever you're sitting there thinking everybody else knows what they're doing and I don't, it's a lie. Every single person is winging it in every single way, and they're all sitting there petrified that everybody else is going to find them out. So don't worry about it. Everyone's winging it. Everyone's winging it.
Yeah. For me, especially where you guys are now, take some time to figure out what's out there. If I was 16 and maybe I saw all the different options, I wouldn't have gone to university and become a midwife because I would have known the options available to me. Take some time now to explore the idea of design, the idea of coding, the idea of PR, marketing, social, online. Really dedicate time to exploring everything the industry has got, and then when you've narrowed down where you think you want to be, then you go for it. And that's where you're going to focus. But take some time to explore, because there's a lot more out there than I think a lot of people really realize. Something for everybody, and something where you can flourish and your passion can come through.
That's how I found UI, basically. I wanted to be a 2D artist, and part of me still wants to, but I kind of found my niche in UI, and now UX, it's become a thing that I'm always thinking about it. If I'm using an app, if I play a game, my brain doesn't shut off. I'm just like, why did the designers do this? Or like, oh, cool, they figured out this problem and did it this way. Or like, oh, wow, this game is accessible to blind people, to deaf people. All these things I'm constantly looking at. Again, it's out of passion. It's not because we're never trying to show off, never. It's always because we like what we do. And for me personally, if you're gonna apply for let's say you're gonna apply for my job, you better embody that, as in like, your CV better look like a graphic designer CV. If I see that you made it, you just chuck some like Microsoft Word stuff into it, and then your link is still like blue and underlined. I'm like, what? Times New Roman. I'm like, what is?
I won't send you mine then.
Yeah, I'll just like, nope. Yeah.
Comic Sans?
I'm gonna kill you. I'm getting a heart attack. Okay, yeah. So like, you know, and if we go to your website, it has to look like a graphic designer's website or UI person's website because you've put thought into that. Because we know you've put thought into your presentation as whoever you're trying to sell yourself as, then we know that you're going to put the same amount of thought in the game that you're going to put in, you know?
Yeah, it's about being on sort of a path of mastery, not just trying to do... You're always learning and trying to improve your own artwork, and yeah, please, I keep seeing all this amazing stuff and what the students are coming out of degrees now. That knocks my socks off compared to my old showreel, you know. Yeah, so I love that new people are always coming in and pushing the limits of everything because I'm always scrabbling there to try and keep up, and yeah, it's one of the great things about working in the 3D art.
Well, in games industry in general, because your competitors are getting younger and younger each year. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing babies making games. Back to young game designers. Oh my gosh, have you seen those kids? They're like 10 years old and they're making games.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
the winner from like year before last, he was 12 and doing stuff in Game Maker, and he was doing like GML scripting, and I was like, oh wow. Because I thought, like, I was really mean in a way, I guess. Because I was like, I guess you use drag and drop. He was like, no. I was like, oh, wow, I couldn't do that.
Excuse you.
When I was your age. Jeez.
Yeah, and again, when I was younger, people older than me were like, oh, wow, you know how to use a tablet? And I'm like, yeah, my dad just bought it from me and just been playing outside of school with it, you know? And again, your competition is everywhere, and that 12-year-old, his passion is there. You can tell he's going to get a job by the time he's 18. He might not even go to university because he knows his stuff, you know. Because everyone has different paths, so you gotta kind of carve out where you want to be, and you sell yourself as that. You know, I'm a programmer. Look at all this code. You know, I'm a 3D artist. Look at how amazing my topology is. Or I'm a UX person. Look at my boxes. Yes. You know, or I'm a social media. Look at I have 15,000 Twitter followers. Beat that. You know? How much do you have? About 35 or something?
44.
Yeah.
It's not that many. It's really low. But 1.5 million subscribers, if that helps.
See? Yeah, I have only 4,000. I have like 10 times more followers than if I wanted to do her job. So
I get so excited if 10 people like something I post on Facebook.
So like being like we're talking about, we keep saying passion. So like I always like to say enthusiasm. So like even if you're just like, I want to make this game, you won't always get the chance to make the game that you want to make. Sure, maybe in like 10 years time, or you know, if you decide to go indie, you can have a go at making it, but for all you know, maybe people really won't like your game anyway, which you know, you find out when it's too late usually. But that sounds really like depressing and horrible.
Very true.
It's true. But so if a job comes your way and you're just like, but I don't really want to do that, just think about trying to do it and put your enthusiasm in it. Because, like, I mean, as I showed earlier, my first thing I worked on was interactive books for kids on the DS. Like, I'm not a child. Well, I wasn't a child when I started, so I didn't really like kids' books. But I found the enthusiasm towards making that because I'm like, oh, I could do this, or I could do this, or I can do that. Sure, it might be, you know, oh, I want to make first-person shooters. That's not what you're making, but it's a step in the door. You have a step in the door, foot in the door, and it's having a go at doing it and working with people who work in the games industry and having a chance to see your game on the shelf, because it is the coolest thing, seeing your game on the shelf. Or even just like people saying really nice things about your games. And yeah, so just like if an opportunity arises, unless you've got an opportunity that is like competing against it and you have to make a decision, take them when they come, because you know it can change your life. It'd be amazing.
One final piece, Nisa?
Just to touch upon what Kat just said. Just because you're not working on a game that you personally like, okay, you're an Overwatch person, you know, you like it and you want to work on Overwatch, fine. That's, you know, if that's your goal, work towards it. But also, don't be ashamed of the game that you're already on. Like, I know people who made games for Barbie games or Bratz or things like that. But you know what? This the same amount of skill and talent is still needed to make those games. And you know what? Those games made a 5-year-old somewhere really happy. And that 5-year-old might grow up to be a game designer because they played a Bratz game. I played so many Barbie games. But I didn't like Barbies growing up, but the games were great. And I was like, oh, wow, these guys, they know what they're doing. And at the same time, I played stuff like Final Fantasy, which is a lot more intricate, you know? And I wanted to be a person who worked on Final Fantasy, Square Enix. Woo, I want to be Square Enix. But the games I've worked on now, stuff like Planet Coaster, making roller coasters. I never played roller coaster games before this, but I'm so proud of it because I see the community going like, wow, oh my god, they just added this feature. Oh my god, the UI is product. Like, and I was like, yes, you know, like yes, you know, enjoy my fans, enjoy my game, you know. And I'm making car games right now, and I again, I don't care about cars, but we have car fans, and all they do is play car games. They might not even play other games, you know. They're not typically gamers, as they call themselves, but they play your game because there's an audience for everything. So be proud of what you make, and you know, be proud of your core audience as well. Just because they're not like hardcore gamers or anything like that, like it's massive. The world is massive, you know. Someone out there will love what you do, and you need to be proud of that. Don't be shy about not working on a big title like, I don't know, Ubisoft Assassin's Creed or something. That's great to aim for, but don't poop on like Harry Potter games or Harry Potter. Yeah. So again, it's just be like, it's about enthusiasm, and I can tell you for a fact that one of my interviewers, like when I got the job, I asked him, "Why did you hire me? Like, there's so many other, you know." I'm just like, "Oh, there's so many other people who's better than me." And then he was like, "Well, you're really enthusiastic." Like, yeah, and then, you know, he was saying how in the interview, I was just like, yeah, I did this thing, and then it worked, and then it didn't work, and then the programmer was like, no, it won't work, but like, no, and then it did work, and I told the programmer, like, yeah, it did work, you know. I was literally like that in my interview, so, and they were just like, okay, so she takes things seriously. So, yeah, enthusiasm shows, and we like it. It might scare a few people, but it doesn't matter. That's how you get the job.
Cool. So I think enthusiasm and really good voices is a good idea.
The internet. I was just going to know. This is something else. The internet is full of mean and horrible people. So don't take their comments as a reason to stop doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Just
don't be that people.
Oh yeah, don't be those people either.
Don't poop on other people.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't want to be pooped on. I'm trying not to swear.
That's the final thing.
That's the hashtag for this event.
Yeah.
Don't be pooped on.
Yeah.
Don't poop
Well, I
on
think that's our job done now. So thank you very much to my speakers and the panelists. Yes, thank you all for coming. Thank you to Leeds International Festival for helping put on this event. Obviously, Cooperative Innovations, check our games out, apply for our jobs. Escape Technologies, they've also supported the filming and the fact this will be online in a few weeks. Hopefully, we'll sort that out. So thank you everyone for coming. We'll be around for a little bit now, and there might be some drinks and stuff left as well. So thank you. Cheers.